This episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Kobold Press and the Tales of the Old Margrave. The Tales of the Old Margrave Kickstarter is running right now. In fact, you are about to hear my awesome interview all about it. Forests and fantasy role-playing games are dark places full of secrets. The Margrave is an ancient enchanted forest that defends itself from those who cut its timber, poach its creatures, or steal its magic. Within these borders, the old ways are strong, and the word of druids carries great weight. Griffins, dragons, and stranger creatures nest and hunt, undisturbed by humans, dwarves, and other lordlings, until the adventurers show up. The Tales of the Old Margrave Adventure Campaign hardcover is for the GM, and it's got adventures from levels 1 through 10. Plus, the Margrave Player's Guide is a softcover book that is full of new player options, new races, druid and ranger subclasses and tools, backgrounds, and forest theme spells. You are going to want to check it out because guess what? I also contributed to this project. Find out more by heading on over to Kickstarter.com and searching for The Old Margrave from Kobold Press. That's Kickstarter.com and The Old Margrave, Margreve. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am talking with the one and only Matt Corley, who is the lead designer of the Old Margrave from Kobold Press. We talk a ton about what makes forest adventures interesting, how to get that good forest magic all up in your fantasy, and so much more. So here is my chat with Matt. All right, everybody. Now I am here with Matt Corley, an amazing game designer. I'm so excited to talk with you about Old Margrave and Forest Adventures today. But before we get to that, Matt, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And before I get too far into me, you're no slouch yourself. I've very much been enjoying Dragon Heist, and congrats on that too, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's awesome. And I am very much excited that you can finally talk about this project that you've worked on for a long time.
Absolutely. So I've been playing games or tabletop games since, 1983, believe it or not. My older brother brought home the Red Box set one day while I was in second grade. And that is actually how I learned a lot of math and reading and history and myths and all that stuff. And man, I remember him and I playing, and by playing, I mean mostly fighting with Isle of Dread and the Lost City in particular, because I wanted to cheat. So, of course, I grabbed all the books and read them ahead of time when he was trying to DM. So I've been playing on and off for a very long time, mostly off lately, but kind of got back into it a couple years ago. Most of my work right now is actually unpublished, which is a bit odd. I've got a few things on the website, of course, but Tales of the Margrave, which is what we're here to talk about. I also have a Deep Magic supplement that is in editing. And then I have something else that I'm writing for myself with a friend that we'll be doing in a couple months as well.
That's awesome. I can't wait to talk with you about Old Margrave, but I do want to quickly dive into your background because I've been where you've been, where you have things that will be coming and are going to be made. But
definitely.
how'd you get started writing professionally for role playing games?
Sure. So, well, I guess first off, I'm actually a pharmacist, and that's what I do for a full-time job. I got into writing professionally, actually as a freelance writer for a sports magazine, probably about 7, maybe 8 years ago. The magazine's Jiu-Jitsu magazine. I was heavily into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at one point. Started blogging at that and kind of got picked up by a magazine. I wrote for them for 3 years. And yeah, it was fantastic. And it's funny because I actually started writing in it because it's an expensive hobby. And I thought that one of the ways that I could defray some of those costs was actually to get gear and review it and write reviews. And that's actually how I started, was just basically begging people for products. And about 1 in 30 or 40 said sure. And I would write about it. And I kind of parlayed that into the magazine subscription or magazine work, and then also using my pharmacy knowledge to do that. And I actually followed a somewhat similar pathway with Kobold as well. And, I will tell anybody out there, even if you don't have a name and even if you've never written professionally, it never hurts to throw a pitch out. And I threw a couple pitches to Scott Gable over at Kobold for the website. And two of those are out there actually right now, and two that I'm pretty excited about and I like. And as a by the way, I just kind of mentioned that I was converting the Hollow, which is a fantastic Richard Pett scenario in Margrave for my group, and said, if you're ever interested, let me know and I can convert some of these and we can do them on the web or whatever works best for you. And he responded actually pretty quickly, letting me know that he was going to talk to Wolfgang about it. And he thought it was kind of an interesting idea. And that's really how it all started. It started with a couple of shots on the web just so that, Wolfgang and them could see my style of writing, and then really just taking it from there, working hard and following up and just kind of being excited about it. I mean, that really, I think is a lot of what it is just to be excited about what you're working on and enjoying it.
Wow, that's really awesome. It's a great thing to see that sometimes it's just hard work and taking the initiative to talk with people, and you can get out there and make it happen. So let's talk a little bit about the Old Margrave. What is it? What are you working on?
Well, so the Margrave is a supplement, old Pathfinder supplement from, gosh, almost a decade ago, I want to say. And it's a collection or it was a collection of 8 adventures, and with a gazetteer on the front, quite a bit of Margrave history as well. And what it is now is it's a wonderful Kickstarter that we've got going. And, for anybody that's looked at Pathfinder versus D&D, they know that, once we cut out those Pathfinder stats and put in the D&D ones or the 5e ones, that we cut out about 20-30%. And I can say that this book is actually, if you include the player's handbook, almost twice that size. So even though we removed all the Pathfinder stats, we added an enormous amount of content. So what we did is we have a gazetteer for the players and the history, some in-depth sections on the Force. The Force itself is the oldest intelligence within Midgard. And the different sections of the Margrave have their own idiosyncrasies. And the Force itself is absolutely paying attention and watching. And it is awareness. And it can certainly have some direct interactions with the PCs and make your games quite a bit more interesting and quite a bit more flavorful as well.
Yeah, it is big time magic forest area. And it's really, really cool that that you took it upon yourself to get this started, and now you're working with Kobold to make it happen. So what is this project exactly? It's on Kickstarter now, which we mentioned at the beginning of the program, but we should remind people, if you're interested in checking this out along with us, head on over to Kickstarter, search for the Old Margrave, and you will be able to see exactly what we are talking about. And full disclosure, I too am involved in this project as well, although I will say it is definitely Matt's baby. So check it out because it is a really, really cool thing that we're working on here. So talk to me, like what have you been doing exactly, and what will people get when they contribute to this Kickstarter?
Absolutely. So what we have is in the campaign book, we have 9 adventures. And you know what? Actually, I think we just added a stretch goal, or we just hit a stretch goal for Dorendi, which are 3 kind of mini adventures that John Sawatsky wrote. So we have adventures for levels 1 through 10. The adventures themselves are really great because not only do they share the same setting, of course, but they begin to build on each other. They're not quite as, I don't want to say railroady as maybe an adventure path, but they are very, very easily connected due to obviously the geography. But also there are some characters that end up reappearing in later higher level adventures. And there's kind of some Easter eggs as you work your way down it as well. So, you start off attempting the Hollow, which is Richard Pett's a fantastic adventure. And if you can survive that one, you get your way up to level 2 and 3. And again, every adventure actually is its own level. So, at least with my campaign, I do it milestones. And so we finish one adventure, you're level 2, we finish 2, you're 3, and so on and so forth. So it keeps it moving really well. And my players have absolutely loved it. We've obviously been playing it for a while. We started back in February when I started writing on the book. So you get 10 wonderful adventures. There's a lot of new All of the art is completely new. Everybody out there knows what to expect from a Kobold. The art from Codex, Toma Beast, and the other products are incredible. I use PDFs and I use mostly electronic stuff for everything, but I get all the books every time just to look at them. I have two daughters, Harper and Lily, second and sixth grade. And they're actually in one of the adventures. They're in the adventure I wrote. And they actually play every once in a while with me. My youngest especially absolutely loves D&D, and she cannot wait to keep playing some of the other adventures in here. My kids love these books. They actually read the books as just for the art.
Wow, that's really cool. That's great that they love it and it has their seal of approval. What a cool thing as a dad to have.
I was trying to get my dad points now before they get too much older. My oldest is 11, so I'm not sure how many more years I'm going to get where she's going to think it's cool that dad does D&D and has these kind of hobbies that I do. So,
some they might come back around. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's a few teenage years where it's like your parents aren't cool. Then they come back around, after college, and it's like, oh, I need money again. Parents are cool.
Yep. Absolutely. So yeah, we have that. We have new races, new options there, new classes. There are new rangers and druids, potentially a druid even from Densister, the originator of the original druid class. We have that coming out as well. There's even a warlock patron that might eventually be unlocked as well. So this, I can't say how excited I am, or I can't really overstate how excited I am about the product. It's going to be 2 books, and it really is a complete reimagining of the product while building on what the initial authors did, because the guys that wrote it initially, guys and gals, did such a fantastic job. I love to work off of old adventures anyway. There's so much just fantastic stuff out there.
So that is one of the big things that I was going to ask you is how much of this is recreation of the old Margrave and how much of it is new stuff? Like how much of it is conversion versus totally new from the mind of Matt Corley, John Sawatsky, and James Introcaso?
So from the conversion aspect of it was still actually an enormous amount of new content. I created 50 new monsters that are not anywhere. I tried very hard not to just reuse stuff from Toba Beast or the SRD or Creature Codex. There are a handful of those in there, but I wanted to make sure that we kept that original feeling and those original creatures that were in there. We have 24 new treasures as well, or magic items, I guess. The rules around it, again, so John and I both have adventures in there, but I think something that people are going to really notice, and again, it is a bit of a conversion, this part, but it's such a difference. The forest itself has very active effects on everything and everybody. And that's not something that you see in 5th edition. There were a lot of things in here that when we were working on it and we were going back and forth with the editors, there were a lot of comments like, well, we don't do that in 5th edition. It's like, well, we do now. There are some things that we've explored that, again, are going to be really kind of for 5th edition. If you've only ever played 5th edition, you're going to be very surprised and you're going to love it. New content itself, though, completely new, other than the 4 adventures that John and I put in there. We have the races classes. Alcide as going to be a playable class. There's Bearfolk Barbarians, or I guess as someone put down, Barbarians are going to be out there. We have Pineys, Shamans. A couple other actually races from the Creature Codex are going to make themselves known as player character options as well. New backgrounds. Gosh, there's so much in there. Status effects. That was something that, we saw a lot on social media from players really, really wanting to get into and kind of really explore how status works in the Margrave and how status works in general in Midgard. And, I talked to Wolfgang about it. And when I created that rule set, we really went into it with the idea that the Margrave is itself and it is its own kind of distinct and intelligent entity. And, your status in Zobek doesn't really matter to the Margrave at all. And so we actually explored that, not only do you have a status, but your status is actually going to be regional, at least to a point. And so, the Margrave watches and the Margrave waits, and your actions have fairly immediate consequences and situations pretty quickly. If you're out there setting fires or throwing fireballs kind of indiscriminately, you might have some problems relatively quickly. So we did it really in depth and on the stats, which is something I really like, and also did a lot of tables on what kind of things the Margrave can do to help or hinder. And, that's something I think that's really great for the DMs out there is, we'll have this narrative. And at the end of the day, though, sometimes we want a table that gives us some, not necessarily very, very specific ideas, but says, in this situation, these are 10 or 12 things that might happen. And I know as a DM, I really enjoy looking at the tables. And so I kind of wrote them along those lines as, again, it's not just you did this happens. It's more of a narrative in the tables themselves.
That's really cool. I love a good table. That's some really great stuff. And it sounds like this is even somebody who is a fan of the old Margrave is really going to get a lot of new content out of this as well. Hey, everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by Kobold Press and the Old Margrave. You're listening to me talk about it with Matt Corley right now. It is such an amazing setting, and I am so proud to have worked on it. I worked on a bunch of awesome creatures that you will see in this thing. All kinds of awesomeness that everything from aberrations to constructs to undead. I've got all kinds of awesome contributions that are going to blow your mind when you see it. We're going to talk a lot more about monsters and good stuff with Matt. So why don't we get back to the interview with him? But first, let me remind you, head on over to Kickstarter.com and search for The Old Margrave. That's Kickstarter.com and search for The Old Margrave, Margreve from Kobold Press. I want to talk to you about writing in a magical forest. We think Dungeons and Dragons, I think we think dungeons often. We think underground, we think fighting in lairs and tunnels and castles and things like that. And while forests, wilderness travel, I think is part of it and a big part of D&D, I don't know that we ever think or a lot of us don't think of like a whole campaign, a whole adventure levels 1 through 10 taking place in this forest. How do you make that work for a game like Dungeons and Dragons, and what sort of things make the old Margrave special like the Force?
So the Margrave really it's very sandboxy. And I mean that in the best possible way. And I personally love a dungeon crawl. I'm playing Rappanathic as well right now. You can't get more dungeon crawly than that. It's a fantastic sandbox. And what we've done is with these additional sections and tables, we have most of these adventures, a lot of them are set up more as events and more of a timeline than a go from A to B, go from B to C. It's more you're traveling in this area or you're traveling for this amount of time and you have these interactions with the different creatures in the forest or with the forest itself. And that sets off a cascade of events. And following up the events is really up to the players and how they do that. There are certainly adventures in there where you can skip half the stuff if you want because of the sandbox style. And it may or may not come back to bite you, but you can certainly get through everything, even if you just go from event 1 to event 4. So it's definitely a very different style. And it's not I'm writing a description for room 1, then room 2, then room 3, then room 4. I'm writing a narrative for event A. And, it ends up being 500, 600, 1,000 words because I want to make sure that the DM has everything he or she needs to get the characters there. And then also to know what the different interactions the characters might have and how those interact and kind of what that next step is. I want to make it as open-ended as I can while still giving them a central storyline. And hopefully one that's compelling enough that they're going to want to follow it. Because if it's just sandbox, then we've got a hex crawl, and which is great. And you actually absolutely can do the hex crawl here. That's not just what it is.
So let me ask you a question about the old Margrave specifically then, because it's such an enormous forest and because there's so much adventure there and potential, and it is a big sandbox. What are some good ways to focus the story within this amazing backdrop where there's so much to do?
All of the adventures actually have a couple different ways to get them started. So each adventure actually does have several hooks to help the players get in there. You could be traveling from Zobek, and there are a million ways to get in it from there. Shadow Fae activity in the forest is on the rise, and so there may be a lot of different reasons to look into that. Maybe as an ally, maybe as a spy of the Shadow Fae. There's also the road, the Great Northern Road that just goes through it. And as a traveler between different areas, the Margrave is kind of a natural barrier between a lot of the different nation states of Midgard. And so if you are traveling from really anywhere, if you're going from Zobek to just about anywhere, or even from the plains, again, just about anywhere, you're going to go through you're going to go through Margrave. I mean, it really is a natural barrier. It's what stopped Dornow from continuing to expand. And so it's very simple and very easy to get in there and get moving and just get started. I mean, the very first adventure just starts with you're walking down the road, and that's kind of, you take it from there. The second one kind of starts with you're kind of been approached by a merchant to look for a specific component or a specific ingredient that's only in the Margrave. My own, again, actually can start in a couple of different ways. One of which is, again, you come across a village and it's dead quiet, and you investigate, and that takes you on a cascade of actions. I think one of the most fun ones, at least one that my players loved, was Challenge of the Fang, which you are chosen as kind of one of the players is chosen almost as an archetype, and takes the role of combating the kind of the feral archetype of a wolf. And so it's the players versus the wolf, and whomever comes out on top, their species, for lack of a better term, begins to take more dominance within the forest itself for the next generation. It's a bit of a riff off of Red Riding Hood. A lot of these stories actually are very, I mean, it's, if you've read the original Grimm's fairy tales, not the Disney ones, but the actual ones, you're going to see a lot of, definitely an homage to that. We certainly try to keep some of that feel in there, the Black Forest and so on.
Wow, that's really, really cool. It definitely has a not your average forest feel to it. And I was super excited because Wolfgang approached me and asked me if I wanted to make a couple monsters for it myself. And I pitched some really weird stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, this sounds great. This sounds perfect." So that was really great. I am super looking forward to the monsters in this thing, because you, again, we should mention, you've done a majority of these monsters, and they're incredible, right?
Yeah, so tons of new monsters and creatures. Almost any NPC is actually completely statted out and built. And I kind of went against the grain on a few things. I know that we typically see NPCs with casters. We call them a warlock, or we call them a sorcerer, or we call them a wizard. I'm just calling them all spellcasters. And I did what I felt like we needed to do was, again, to make sure that these NPCs all had a very evocative feel. I didn't want to limit them. I didn't want to say this is a wizard, and so only get certain spells, because some of these and a lot of these are probably better classified as a witch, or maybe sort of a warlock kind of. We have, oh gosh, we have some wonderful stuff. So we have a house. Actually, we have the house of a witch that the players can take for a ride, which is really fun, actually. Some of the creepier stuff, of course, Richard's adventure has the Hollow Man himself, which I think we've seen a few pictures of him out there. He was created. We have these are really fun Sin Eater effigies, which may be good and may be bad. It really just kind of depends on how the characters interact with them. And then also a little bit of luck as well, because these effigies may actually absorb some of the bad, some of the sins that those characters have done. Conversely, they may end up kind of dispersing some of the things they've already absorbed as well. Lots of new magic items as well, of course, that are all really fun. I think one of the more fun ones we did was Grandmother's Fire. So we do have an adventure towards the end with Baba Yaga. And while she's not something that you're going to be fighting, we know they're PCs, so they will, of course, want to. Hopefully that doesn't happen too much. And at that level, if they do, they're probably going to get swatted down, or at least they should. But, we have some really cool stuff. We have the fire-infused water elementals. So these were water elementals that are, and this is from an old edition of the game where you actually had water elementals that were actually close to the, to the lava, to the fire elemental plane. And so they actually were hot. they did steam damage. The Cinderfold Vaginoi is also a really fun one that I created. Again, that's a piece of, I think we've got that art out there as well. It kind of looks like a deep one holding a skull that's lit. So a couple new bosses that are really fun. Probably one of my most favorite ones, again, is actually from that one, is the Werewolves of the Margrave are not quite what you're expecting. And it's something that I actually ended up doing with a player once, and it worked a little bit. We ended up having to change it, but the Werewolves of the Margrave may not just be werewolves. I think it's something so much fun to do as a designer, is to just go grab anything. I mean, it really just grab anything you can find. And these werewolves may have a couple class levels, and they may have a couple class levels that work really, really well with a werewolf. And as soon as you see it, you're going to know they come in and they are raging. And so a barbarian werewolf is just a wonderful creature.
It is great.
And it's, again, I think anybody out there that's designing and playing, I think, first thing, you get a little bit off tangent, but it's your game. Do anything you want. Have fun with it. And that's what we try to do with a lot of these tables and a lot of this information, is really just to give you everything you might need to, when your characters ask you, or when your players ask you stuff that you don't know what's going on, or you don't, it's not written out, because I can't write that, and no one really can. But you have the context, and you know what's going to work best for your group, and you'll have a pretty good idea, and you can just go for it. And that's what we did. The tables, more tables. So our $50,000 stretch goal, which we're inching towards, I think we're only probably about $12,000 away from that, at least as I speak. And it is something I'm very happy with, and something I put a lot of work into. Well, there's two things. Ben McFarlane wrote a section on Baba Yaga, which is someone that he absolutely loves, and has an incredible depth of knowledge about all of this stuff. I mean, Ben's encyclopedic as far as it goes with Midgard and all the Kobold products, really. And so we have Ben's product, but then what I have is something, again, we did a lot of play testing, and that's something else that was new, with all these, these adventures. And you've been designing for a very long time, and you're very familiar with the adventures from 5 years ago are not the ones today at all. And it's not just the edition, it's the players are very different. And these are 10 years old, and they were Pathfinder. And so there's a lot of differences there. And so we did we did a lot of playtesting across the country for all of the games. Every single adventure has been playtested by multiple groups. And I don't mean not just my friends that are getting to hang out here on Thursday nights, but by groups everywhere. And I went through every single email and every single playtest feedback, made adjustments, and made some changes based on what all of them said. I don't think I realized how important feedback, or I didn't think I realized how important playtest was until I really did something of this size and this magnitude. They were fantastic. So if you were a playtester, thank you so much. You made this better. I don't know how else to say it, other than that you did a great job and you made this better. And hopefully you'll like you'll see some things that you had some input on. And one of those things was random encounters, because again, we have something kind of sandboxy. And so Wolfgang and I were talking about it one night, and long story short, I created 6 tables of 12 encounters that are based not only on kind of rough geography of the forest, but also CR and also time of day. So it's easy. I've got these 5th level characters. It's night. They're in the heart. What do I do? And, the encounters themselves are not, you see 1d6 dust goblins. That's there. That's fine. That's helpful to a point. But these are more like, here's one, is a band of traveling children, or a band of children are traveling by themselves, and they spot the heroes. They rush up to them asking for help getting home. The children are a mix of halflings and gnome urchins, intent on picking the pockets of the travelers. And that's an easy one, actually. That's the Great Northern Road for a low-level character. When I talk to Ben, I tell him I'm a frustrated Call of Cthulhu player, because I do play Cthulhu some, and I love it. And one of the encounters, if you're at a high enough level, is a Gug. And if you are a Cthulhu player, you know what a Gug is. If you are not a Cthulhu player, you probably don't want to find out. because they are rough. And so we just have things like that. And actually, so something from some of the fiction is the Moonlight King strolls into the camp with a satyr. He produces empty cups for each member of the party, invites you all to have a drink and tell tales. And that's an encounter. And these encounters are really intended for, I mean, that's 30 minutes, maybe an hour. I mean, it depends on your group. But these encounters really are, you can do sessions with just these encounters. And that's what I really hope they do, is that they give you some ideas. You know, you come across a tree, there is a sword stuck in it up to the hilt. And that's all I need to give you as the DM to play for a very long time. And you just let the players go, and you know what, they'll run that session for you. And so that's that. Again, that is actually our $50,000 goal. That's our next big one with Ben's Baba Yaga. 96 of those. So there's a lot. And I couldn't be prouder of them, actually. I really think they did a great job. Kim Owen helped, was a fantastic editor that I worked with on this. I'm not sure. Have you had a chance? You may have worked with Kim in the past.
So Kim worked on Dragon Heist, but the way Wizards works is you hand over your stuff and then they sort of take it from that final release. So yeah,
Gotcha.
But I am aware of the legacy of Kim Mohan.
So playtesters, thank you. Kim Owen, thank you so much. I learned more from Kim, and Kim had a lot of incredible feedback and advice on this book. And again, it's gonna come out and you're gonna love it. Everyone that reads it's gonna love it.
It is incredible. It sounds very, very rich and detailed with everything. It's awesome that the random encounters go into such great detail and have such variety of like time of day and challenge rating and location, and all of that makes this an infinitely usable book. You could buy it and play in the Old Margrave and play through the adventures, and then you could continue to use that encounter table anytime your players are in a forest. There's so much awesome there, and one of the cool things I really like about the Old Margrave is that it can be dropped into any setting as well. We're talking a lot about Zobek and some other sort of Midgard places, right? But you could really drop the Old Margrave anywhere where there would be a forest.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's absolutely no reason why there's no conversion needed. There's no updates really needed. You just change the word Margrave to the name of whatever forest you happen to be around, and go and take off, and the players will love it. It is such a evocative setting. There is so much detail and there is so much information. Those tables, again, we mentioned a few earlier about hex crawling, and those tables, you could hex crawl through this entire thing. I think some of us, when we did Tome of Annihilation, you kind of got they're probably the first exposure to hex crawling for a lot of folks, a lot of the newer players. And you could do a very, very easy, you could do the same exact thing with Margrave very easily with those tables and just with the information that And, that's a fantastic way, too, to also introduce any of the adventures that are on there. You're walking along and then all of a sudden you kind of hit Challenge of the Fang, or you're walking along and you see Gall of the Spider Crown, or whatever it might happen to be. John Sawatsky's adventures in particular are very kind of forest encounter, very fluid on how you introduce them, which is fantastic. I do think it's something wonderful too, is that for, I play Adventure League quite a bit, and play, of course, Midgard, and I play Cthulhu, and I play kind of whatever I get my hands on. I don't know. I wish I had more time. Obviously, I think everybody wishes I had more time. One of the things I like most about Midgard and Kobold products in general, and this one very much so, is that it's going to teach you to be a better player, because if you do silly stuff, you might not survive. And I think that, with, again, getting on a little bit of a tangent, I think that's something that some campaigns have lost, is that there isn't that much of a sense of risk for their players. Without the risk, I don't think the reward's as much fun, or there isn't as much reward. I don't think it's as much fun. If I know, I have a 19th level assassin monk from Adventure League. I could literally one shot a red dragon with the way that he's set up. And that's fun, but it's not as much fun as running through the hollow as a first level character and very nearly dying like 7 times. I mean, that adventure took forever as far as game time because we kept having to stop and long rest because every time, the players would try, well, that's, I can do this or I can do that. This is only a first level miniature. And they'd play something kind of silly or they weren't paying attention and somebody's down making death saves immediately. And I think that's fun. It's a little bit old school, but I just think that's a lot of fun. And I think that's something that this product really brings to it. That said, I can tell you the second and third adventure, even the one that I wrote, as much as I love old school, you can finish that entire thing without having a single battle. And you could probably do the same with, actually, you could definitely do the same with the second. Mine's more of a mystery. And that said, if you go into it head first, you can absolutely go into it head first. So those are the two I like. I like those two a lot, obviously, but it checks all the boxes, I think.
That's awesome. This is a really, really cool product. Obviously, I'm biased, but it's great. People will get a ton of use out of it. It's good for players and it's good for game masters. It's got virtual tabletop versions that people can check out. Plus, it's got the hardcover and softcover book versions. So there's really something for everybody in this thing. Definitely check it out. Where can people find out more about the Old Margrave, and where can they find you, Matt?
Sure. So Tales of the Old Margrave is at Kickstarter right now. Just go ahead and link into Tales of the Old Margrave. It'll come right up. There are a handful of articles on Kobold Press as well, just to kind of give you some updates. If you look at Kobold's Twitter account, there's art that has been shared. I've shared some on mine. I'm one of the few social folks out there that actually uses his full and correct name on everything. So I am out there as Matthew D. Corley. I'm at Matthew D. Corley on Twitter. We have a Midgard Discord, which is a lot of fun. And, there's a lot of us actually, folks on Kobold that are actually on it and fairly active. Myself, Ben McFarland, Brian Susskind has been on it some. John is on it every once in a while. I think I've seen probably 3 or 4 other folks. And, if you ever end up wanting to play test something, that's a great place to start too, because they tend to get the inside scoop as well. So, anybody can reach me at any time at Twitter. I love having interactions with people. And when people give me kind of feedback, good or bad, I do appreciate it, actually.
That's awesome. And you can check it all out over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. Matt, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Can't wait to hear how this all comes out. And thank you to everyone again for all of the support that everyone's got. I keep saying that because it really does mean a lot to me. So for any of you folks out there that want to get into writing, I really can't stress enough to try. You really just go out there, pitch stuff. Kobold takes web stuff fairly regularly, and you don't have to be a name at all. And get yourself out there. Just keep working, do what you enjoy, and that's really the best thing I can say for you.
That was an awesome interview with Matt. Everybody, you should definitely check this out. And hey, if you like me, you may want to help me out in another way that's totally free. Head on over to iTunes and leave Tabletop Babble a 5-star review. You can do that just like Ite Horev from Israel, who said, "I want to hear you try to say my name." I hope I did okay, Ite Horev. And your review reads, "Awesome podcast. The topics are always interesting, the guests are great, and it's really refreshing to listen to a podcast about RPGs, which isn't people talking about what they played this week. Kudos. This is also a great place to mention another great RPG podcast, On the Shoulders of Dwarves. Let's hope this gives them some traffic." Wow, I'm going to check that out. I have not heard of that podcast. Thank you so much for this review, Ite. I really appreciate it. All right, people, you can check out the game design stuff I'm doing over at worldbuilderblog.com, or you can head on over to Twitter and follow me there for all kinds of RPG goodness. It is at twitter.com/James Introcaso. I also wanted to let people know that if you are free the day this podcast launches, that is Monday, October 8th, we are going to be doing something very special on Twitch at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you head on over to twitch.tv/Don't Split the Podcast at that time, you can watch me and Nassim and Celeste from Venture Maidens, Ron Frazier, Little Red Dot, and Craig Campbell play Craig's new RPG that is horror-themed called Die Laughing. It is a comedy game. It's going to be really fun. So head on over to Twitch tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget that RPGs are like sex. You're going to want to make sure you have plenty of scratch paper available for new ideas. Hey everybody, just wanted to let you know that this podcast was brought to you by Archvillain Games. Archvillain Games is having a Kickstarter from October 1st through the 30th, selling character sheet gauntlets, which are binders for your character sheet. They have this awesome patent-pending design and figurine-level detail. I got to see these things at the D&D in a Castle convention, and they are incredible. There are detailed covers for Fighter, Rogue, Cleric, and Wizard. The Kickstarter has already funded, so you know you are gonna get the goodness, and each holds 5 character sheets. They're available painted or unpainted, and over $40,000 was spent on the design and prototyping. Plus, if you want to paint your own, you can get painter kit add-ons. You can see all of your amazing detail with the covers closed, which have these amazing, intricate designs on them. Finally, something special and high-end for players to have at the table. It's not just all about the DM. They're super easy to use. They are made to hold a blank sheet of paper or the standard 5e character sheet. So head on over to archvillaingames.com or search for Archvillain Games on Kickstarter to grab your Archvillain Gauntlet today.